Today's guest is Eric Rajah. Eric is a founder and director of A Better World, a charity that focuses on health, education, and well-being of impoverished people around the world. More than 50,000 children attend schools built by A Better World. The charity has worked in 15 countries and invested over $35 million into communities in need. Eric received the Meritorious Service Medal from the Governor-General of Canada in 2021 and was inducted into the Alberta Order of Excellence in 2011. Eric, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you join me today.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. Glenn is what I refer to you as.
Yes,
a friend.
that's
happy to be here with you.
That's perfectly fine. Yes, thank you. There are many positive benefits to charity, as you know, Eric. But today we're going to start by discussing some of the negative effects of charity, especially surrounding international aid work. From your experience, what are some of the dangers and pitfalls of international charity work?
I think the biggest danger in my mind is not thinking about the needs of other people. This might find very interesting. You say, well, aren't you going there to help them? But it's much deeper than that. What we see as need sometimes is not what the local people see as need. And we can talk about some examples of that in a moment.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. Why don't you give us an example, some examples to start with so we can understand your point better?
Sure. I was at a situation at a rehab center that we have where I saw some children playing soccer. And of course, because of their disabilities, they were on the floor playing soccer and they were crawling back to their rooms. And immediately my thought was, we can buy them all wheelchairs. Why are we not doing this? So I went to the physiotherapist there who looks after the children. And I said, we certainly have enough money to fund wheelchairs for them. You know, that's one of the things that we do. And she, with the help of a translator, told me the language that she used was, if Eric did that, he will be stealing from the children. I said, what would I be stealing from the children if I gave them wheelchairs? And she said to me simply, come back a year from now and I will show you what you would have stolen from them. I came back a year later and I have a video that shows that these children that I saw were starting to stand up and take their first steps towards walking. So the lesson is, what I was moved with compassion to do was not the right thing. They knew that they were working to get them to walk, and by giving a wheelchair, I would have stolen their ability to walk. They would have simply used the wheelchair. Now, if they couldn't walk down the road, of course, that would have been the final answer. So that was one important lesson. We think there is a need, but that may not be the real need.
Right.
Which is very difficult to see sometimes.
Are there any mistakes that you made early on in your work because you were not aware of local needs?
Yes, I would say the biggest mistake, I think, convincing ourselves of a need that we see, but they don't see, and then we push through that need.
Right.
And I can share some examples.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and share some examples of that?
Sure. A typical example was when we were in a part of Kenya where people are not used to growing vegetables. We have this idea, instead of feeding them, they should grow the vegetables. So we said, we can provide you water, we can provide you this and that. And we went and made them plant a garden. Even though they didn't know anything, we hired a garden, we planted it. And the next year when I went back, there was no garden. And I said, what happened? I was actually taking some people to invest more in gardens. And now I'm embarrassed standing there with donors, which I was going to show off, so to speak, the successful agriculture program. There was nothing. And then the people said me in this area, they said elephants came and ate them all. And I asked them, well, why didn't you tell me that? And they simply said, you wanted the garden. We never asked for it. And so those are the kinds of mistakes that are easy to make. Good intentions.
Yeah.
And then it turns out to be some mistakes. Okay, we learned some lesson.
Yeah.
Could we have put fences? Yes, we could have. We could have done a lot of other things. So of course, we learned from the local people.
Yeah.
People, it's very interesting when you're donating something. And I use this example here in Canada. I live in Alberta. And people, if somebody comes and says, Eric, we like to donate a swimming pool to you, I probably won't tell them how many months of the year I can use it. I'd be happy to take it.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And it can happen. People don't want to turn down a gift. So to be really careful when you're out there to be the voice of the poor and deeply understand them.
Oh, that's very interesting. While we're on this topic, perhaps it would be educational for us, for the audience, to just understand how you involve local people in your charity work. How do you assess the needs?
Yeah, that's always the most difficult part. We prefer to use a model called a community development model. That simply means we are working with the community. We look at it as a three-way partnership: the community, the government, and us. If we're the only ones doing everything, it's never sustainable. You can temporarily solve problems, but in the long run, local people have to take ownership and take responsibility for doing some things.
Right.
And that is one of the challenges. So then when we go to a community, we ourselves want to meet with the community and see whether they're interested in the three main things that we do, one being education, water, and health. Not every community necessarily needs everything. So we typically would go out into the community, look at the existing schools, look at what infrastructure needs are there. And then we look at, do these children have water? Do they have sanitation? And then work from there. So that's how we scope out us and local people together.
Right.
And what I call is a dating process. Try to earn the trust on both sides and genuinely look at the needs and then compare it to other communities and then go and invest. Another way we look at this is like a business investment. Is the investment good? Is the money we're going to invest from other people going to give good returns?
Yeah.
That's the way we think of our charities. We think of our charity as an investment company to make lives better.
Right. And so you see it more as a partnership rather than you coming in and trying to guess what they need or impose something on the local people.
Correct. Sometimes we'll take up to 3 to 6 months and different teams going and assessing the needs, just to be sure it's going to be the right investment. The reason for that is we'd like to stay with the community for long periods of time. We're talking 10 years sometimes, continually developing and growing their community or within their community. So it's not a drop-in, drill a well, we're gone.
It's an ongoing relationship.
An ongoing relationship. I should be able to go into any community and they should recognize and call me by name, and I should be able to do the same thing with them. Whether it's the village elder or the principal of the school or the healthcare worker, I should be able to know them by name. That's what a partnership. But the partnership also means contributions from all parties. And we can talk about what that looks like.
Yeah, why don't you say something about the contribution from all parties? That sounds very interesting.
We have learned that without a partnership, nothing is sustainable. So our model of a partnership, I'll use one simple example, so this will apply to many things like a school building. So we know that the tax base is not there necessarily to look after infrastructure. So we involve three partnerships. The community has to have the land and the space. We will never buy land. The moment you start buying land, that's another way of changing the pricing of land. When foreign people come and willing to pay, and we don't understand the economy, so we'll offer whatever to fulfill our charity goals. So we tell them, you want the school, you contribute the land. The government has to sign on to operate and pay for the teachers. And I've seen other charities who have done everything only to find when their teachers need a salary increase, they call the charity in Canada. And so it's a never-ending cycle. And then in the end, it's not sustainable. The schools are sitting empty.
Wow.
So in our case, we won't even start it unless the government agrees that they will run the curriculum and put the extra teachers if we're going to expand the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Then our role is to do the funding and monitor it and make sure that we're visiting the projects often enough to know that they are functioning. So that's the three-way partnership. And fortunately for us, we have not had a failure on the school side, but we have had failures in other sites. So to be fair, I'll balance off by giving an example of that. We were convinced a clinic was needed. It was partly built by the government. And we thought, hey, they have put their effort into it. The land is there. And the government convinced us finish it for us. So we finished it with complete confidence from people that we have worked before that it will be staffed and run, and 2 years later, it's still not open. So those are difficult to reconcile in our mind.
Right.
We didn't start it from scratch. It was 50% done.
Yeah.
Why did they ask us to complete it if there was no intention?
Right.
And we are powerless at this point to do anything.
Right.
And we're not prepared to staff it and run it.
Right.
Because that's putting bad money because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
All right, so that's one example. We are struggling with water, where the communities are not stepping forward to do their share of the water, i.e. a small contribution, or pay for water when it breaks down. Then on the other hand, we have Canadians saying everybody has right to clean water. So what do? Give them clean water, and then when the pump and everything breaks down, continue to keep on funding it. Again, that's not sustainable.
What do you
these
think?
are real challenges.
What do you think the reason is for that, for the lack of participation in those water projects?
I can give you what we think is happening in our communities. May not be the case everywhere. One thing we feel is, will the community think, or is thinking, that a better world will bend? They have done everything else for us. They have built a school, they have built a clinic. In time, they will bend. We'll wait until then. Or is it because sometimes when I ask them, they tell me, oh, my ancestors got the water from the river. They lived till 80 years old, a little bit of diarrhea here and there. What's the big problem?
Yeah.
See, here we will be jumping up and down the moment there's some contamination in water, right?
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me to sometimes understand that people can have cell phones and pay for it monthly, but can't think of paying something for clean water.
Right.
Right? There's something we are missing to understand. So while we have money on one hand that we raise to deliver clean water, I'm not seeing the community taking an active part in wanting this water.
Yeah.
Which is very, very interesting because everywhere in Canada, water for Africa, water for here and there.
Yeah.
But I go down there and say, okay, what are you prepared to put in? And people have a blank look in their face.
Yeah. It's just, it's not, doesn't in those particular communities, it just doesn't have the same kind of priority.
Yeah. So that's something I think we have to either accept it.
Yeah.
But here's the other side, Glenn. We don't want to give clean water or at least want to give it in a way that it's sustainable. But when we don't give it, they are taking up all the medication from the clinic when they get sick. So we are paying, like I say, we are paying through the back end instead of the front end, so to speak. They're having diarrhea and going and making use of the clinic. So we're just struggling on trying to resolve that thinking on our part and on their part.
Right. We've discussed one danger of international charity work. Let's discuss another. Another issue, I think, is that some charity work undermines the local economy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think because I come from a faith-based background and see missions, the word missions has always implied to, in my younger days, you go and do something for other people. So in other words, you go to Africa and you paint buildings and build buildings. Very quickly, I learned that's what not the real need is. The wages are $1 to $2 a day. And when we go and do these things, we take away from their work. I want to be able to say this school was built by the local people. It's their blood and sweat.
Right.
And that's when they will protect that investment because it's their investment. It's for their children. It's
Right.
not my school. So how do you balance this thing out? I take a lot of people, as you probably know. It's about skill. We take people that have skills that other people don't have, or in certain countries, like the physiotherapists, the health workers. And while you're there, you want to train them. I don't want people to think that people shouldn't travel and do these things. All I'm saying is be sensitive. You need to travel. You need to see the needs.
Right.
Our goal is to hire as many people, even if we were there working for a day. How can you build anything in 2 weeks anyways on your vacation?
Yeah.
We're there to empower them.
Right.
Assess needs, give skills that they don't have. So I'm strongly encouraging people when we go now, that if you're going to do a project where the skill is there, either we don't do it, or we actually work with them and hire some local people to work with us to do it. All of our schools are built by local people. And for 2 years, here's a classic example, for 2 years, we have not been able to travel. And every single project has been delivered by the local people.
Wow.
They're actually running me out of my job. So that's really what the big goal is.
I was actually going to ask you about your schools in Afghanistan. How have they been affected by the Taliban gaining power again?
Very good question. That has been a big worry and a concern. At the beginning, I was worried about two things. Number one was, will the Taliban destroy the schools, which is what I experienced when we first went to build in 2004. Taliban, I think, left in 2001 and 2, and we were there 2 years after. And all the schools, or a lot of the schools that I saw, were destroyed. That's the first image that came to me a couple of months ago. Investments are going to be gone. So that was my first worry. Fortunately, I just compiled the entire report of our schools in Afghanistan this week. I had somebody in Afghanistan go visit the schools and get me all the pictures. Not a single school was destroyed.
Oh.
And every school is functioning with girls.
Wow.
We are hearing different things here, but in the northern province where we have all of our schools, every school is open right up till grade 12 for the girls.
Wow.
So I was very, very happy when I got that report from a local student who graduated from one of our schools, was in university. So I asked her to go and check on these schools for me, and she was able to freely travel and get that information for me this week.
Wow.
So I'm very happy and hopeful.
That's great news. And that probably says something about the investment that the local community has in these schools.
That's precisely what I was told. It was a community effort, and they were doing everything to negotiate with the Taliban. One, not to destroy it. Secondly, to reopen so the girls can go.
Right. Very interesting.
That also happened in Kenya during the post-election violence.
Mm,
I was worried our schools will be burnt and destroyed.
right.
And interestingly, because of the model that says these are community schools, the community protect them, and not a single one was destroyed or burned down because of tribal reasons.
Eric, one last question. How prevalent is this model of local participation in the charity industry? Are you doing something unusual, or is this standard practice, or how would you describe that situation?
Lots of people talk about it being a standard practice,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes a lot of effort. It's actually, I'm finding myself, and I've talked to you this before privately, it's easy to send money.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the question. So I think we are small enough that we can achieve these things.
Mm.
And we often talk about our scalability. If we had a lot of money coming in, we would probably saying, let's build more schools. We have to be accountable to the donors.
Right.
Send it to somebody and go and build it. That happens often. I saw this especially in Haiti and after the tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
We would go there to build a school, and the people will say, no, this organization can give us twice the money that you can.
Mm-hmm. Eric, given that charity work, this kind of charity work, international charity work in particular, is so difficult and requires such a commitment, how do you stay hopeful and positive in that kind of situation?
I think one should never discourage and give up on human beings, because that's what we have in this world. And one should not give up on the idea that you cannot make this world better. Once we go down that road, then we really might as well pack it in as humanity. So what we have to do is continue to learn and always be generous, whether it's in your local home, in your backyard, or elsewhere, to be just have that mindset of being mindful about the struggles other people face. Yes, you could make some mistakes. You could find people who are not grateful for what you do, or you might even find that your investment didn't always work out. But my message to people is don't get discouraged. Give of yourselves, give of your time, and it will make a difference.
Very, very well put. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.